Hi there, good afternoon. So I'm with my friend Miss Chandra Moyer, and we have been talking about some leadership principles that have really been weighing heavy on my heart lately. And I think really with yours too when we started talking about it. And it's the whole principle. Well, let me back up. So we see this at church, we see it in business, we see it in the home. And it's really about, so I sit under you, and you're my leader. Do you think that's a good way to explain it?
Yeah, I think it's pretty
And I hear God giving me a direction and a way to go to handle a situation or a move in my life or just any kind of transition. Okay.
good. Sorry, we're going to start over again.
So I come to you, and what you hear from God is different than what I heard from God. But because you're the leader, there's some struggle. Do you think that's a good word? Like struggle? If I follow what I hear and not what you heard.
Yeah. You know, it's sort of like, I mean, I understand when people are young in the faith,
Right?
and they come into, leadership and they're needing training. But after a while, I'd like to reference it to raising children.
Exactly.
When I was
Yes.
raising my children when they were young, I basically did everything for them initially, changed the baby diapers. But as they progress through life, you have to step back a little bit and let them do things on their own. And
Right.
sometimes they're going to make decisions
That don't align
that
with what
don't
you
align
think.
with what you think. And you have to allow them to make the decisions. And then as they grow to teens, and then I have adult children now, three
Right.
adult children, and they're making some life decisions now.
Right.
And they don't know, and I don't always agree with their life decisions.
Right.
But I have to sit back at this point and allow them to make the decisions. And even if they make the mistakes, I'm there to support them. I will voice to them, my concern in their decision-making process. But at the end of the day, I have to sit back and let them make those decisions. And I have to trust God in that process.
And see, I think that's key. I think sometimes we limit God's ability in other
do.
people's lives.
We do.
Or I hear God through my own filters, my own perspective, my own experiences, and I want to put that on you instead of letting you experience God for yourself.
Yes.
And so let's say we do that. So you heard one thing, I hear something very different, but I have to trust what I hear.
Yes.
Because that's how I grow. That's how I grow in my faithfulness. That's how I grow in God's faithfulness and knowing that He's faithful to me. And let's say I mess it up. It's a big, huge, big mess up. Like I got it wrong. God is never surprised by that.
It sure isn't.
And I love that because there's nothing that I can do to mess it up so bad that His grace didn't already cover it.
Absolutely.
And I think we forget to teach that part of the principle.
We do. And, I was in the church for many years as an ordained minister, and I've seen this happen so many times when leadership, and I'm just going to call it what it is, a lot of control in a lot of the churches and leadership. And what happens with that, when someone voices a concern, a member voices a concern about an issue, sometimes the leaders take it personally. And I'm just going to give an example. I had a situation with my daughter years ago, and the person they were going to assign to lead the youth group was an individual who had sexual issues. I mean, he had been in the news a few years
Wow.
previously, and he's now going to be head of the youth group with all these girls, my daughter included. And I have given my children permission at the time. You don't have to hug anyone you don't want to hug.
Right.
If you feel uncomfortable,
Right, absolutely.
But so I went to the pastor about this issue, and basically he said to me, well, basically the person is rehabilitated, and that may very well be, but you don't allow someone who was maybe struggling with alcoholism, may have been an alcoholic, and you don't put him in front of a bar and say serve drinks.
Right.
So when I expressed that to him, basically I was preached from the pulpit. And I was rebellious, and we left that church. Yes, we did, because God gave us the release to do that.
Right.
And that wasn't a safe place. That's one incident. There have been many other incidents, Alice, and
Right.
it concerns me when I see controlling issues in the church among the sheep. God did not raise pastors to control the sheep.
Right.
You
It's
know,
exhausting.
It's exhausting, first of all.
is.
And,
Yeah.
we're not equipped to do that. God didn't create us to do
Right.
that.
Right.
But what he did equip to train them
Right.
and to equip them and to release them, but not to control.
Right.
And, I always said if I had raised my kids the way I've seen so many leadership, and I don't mean to browbeat the church, but I've been to so many through the years, raise the way they're training people to be dependent upon them, depend on them to hear
Right,
from God,
right.
not equipping them and releasing them. My children would still be in baby diapers, and I would still be feeding them with a bottle. You know.
That's so true, because if I have to wait until Sunday, and we'll say midweek, whenever midweek service would be, to hear from God through you, then what was the point of the veil?
Right.
Then what, you take us back before the cross, because what was the point of God sending Holy Spirit
Yes.
to be with all of us, to reside in me? That's my guidance. He's my
Yes.
wisdom.
Yes.
He's the intelligence of
Absolutely.
the Godhead. And the only way for me to learn to hear his voice is to step out when I think I hear it.
Yes.
And I agree with instruction and training,
too.
and I
needed.
agree that you as my leader would say, I'm not real sure, this is what I'm
Right.
hearing, but if you really have heard from God, then you need to test that. Instead of, on the flip side, saying, oh well, watch out because you didn't submit to me,
Yes.
and then you're
Yes.
rebellious because you're testing the waters.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so exhausting to control so many aspects
It is.
instead of really letting God be God. I listened, this is a great story that I heard. It pertained to marriage at the time, but there was this mom feeding her two boys pancakes, and she was making pancakes for them. They're sitting at the counter, and they're fighting with each other about who's going to eat the first pancake. And she thought, oh, what a great time to teach this spiritual lesson. And she said, boys, if Jesus were here, he would let his brother have the first pancake. And the older brother said to the younger brother, you be Jesus. But we do that all the
Yes.
time. We have an expectation that I want you to behave in such a way, but I'm not going to hold myself to that.
Yes.
And we all need to reflect Jesus and let God be God.
Yes.
Because we do it in marriage, where I want you to do what I think is right. When you hear from God, we do it in our parenting, where we have to learn to trust that, first of all, God's tapestry and his plan, he says, my thoughts are higher than
Yes.
your thoughts. And so I can't even begin to conceive
No,
how
we
he's
can't.
going to weave all this together. I'm naive to think that I know what that looks like.
Right. But we don't. We really
Right.
don't know how he's going to weave it together.
Right. And so I need to trust that God is big.
Yes, he is.
And that he knows how to speak to you. And you might need to mess that up. Maybe you don't mess it up.
Right.
Maybe really
Maybe you get it really right.
right.
Too.
And
That's
maybe the
happened.
leader, maybe this was a growth opportunity for the leader.
Mm-hmm.
God works everything for good, I'm just going to say. And he knows exactly what it takes for each of us. But if we don't step out in faith and start trusting what we hear, then we're handicapping
We are.
a whole
We are.
body of people, and especially this generation that's coming up that wants an authentic,
They want an authentic
real
relationship.
move
real
of God. Absolutely. And they have the faith if we would provide them with the opportunities and the experiences to be able to say, you know what, your filters are different. Your perspective on that
Yes.
is different.
Yes.
But also trusting that God might not move in the way that I think he's going to move in my daughter's life and in that generation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about valuing the other person.
Yes.
In other
yes,
words,
I agree with that.
I'm flipping a little bit with leadership, but we can have differencing, and I love Alice,
Right.
but we can have differencing views on political views.
Sure.
And we're both, we love Jesus, but we may be on opposite poles on
Sure.
our views because of
Sure.
our filters. But there's something about valuing and respecting that individual. And
Absolutely.
giving them room to express it.
Right.
You may disagree with it, but honoring them.
Yes.
And that. And so that's what I feel like, even with the leadership aspect of this, and bringing this back to, as a leader, as a pastoral ministry leader, is honoring and valuing those
because
God
there's
is-
enough room for all of us.
Yes, there is.
Yeah,
Yes, there
and I
is.
think we lose sight of that sometimes too, that if I make room for your gift, then it diminishes mine. But God doesn't work that way.
No,
There's
it doesn't.
enough room for your gift and my
Yes.
gift and all of those gifts that are part of the body.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we hope you enjoyed this. Give us some feedback in the comments. You can check out Chandra's website, chandramoyer.com. Also gracefulimpact.net. So thanks a lot for listening.
Thanks.